Hi everybody, this is an overview and video cast of the lab for week 8, which is April 11th. This lab's a little different than the labs we've done in the past with the notebook and running and copying and pasting code and so forth. We're moving into a more theoretical part of the course, learning about sampling and sampling distributions, and so the lab reflects that. So let's go into our week 8 materials, and then we're going to go to our lab, and you see the lab's called Building a Sampling Distribution. The lab actually has two components to it. One is doing a swirl, and the second is working with the idea of samples and sampling distributions. So the first thing that you're asked to do is swirl number 9, starting statistics. So I'll just show you, and I'm sure you may remember, but how we do this in Lehman 360 to log in. And then apps, and then our studio. Whoops, typed that wrong. Okay. Okay, so depending on where you left off, you may be in your notebook area, you may be in your console area. Everything we're doing for the lab today is in the console area. So you can make the bottom part bigger, and you can minimize the top part where the notebook is. And depending on where you are going to want to do library, swirl in parentheses, and then swirl a set of empty parentheses, and that's going to ask me where I want to go. I'm going to say, let me start something new. Your menu at this point may look different. You might have this menu when you first show up, and you always want to select Sociology Swirl, and then the one that we're working on this week is Starting Statistics, which is number 9. Now, I'm not going to go through the whole swirl. You all know how to do the swirls and so forth, and the swirl solutions are also posted and available for you on Blackboard. But once you complete your swirl number 9 and you're done with it, you want to type by, or if you're at a numeric menu, you're going to choose 0 to get to the next level menu, and then 0 again to exit. And so we're just going to be in the console right now, and that's what we're going to be using for the second part of our lab. So the second part of the lab, if we go back over there, involves step 2 and the rest of the following steps. We are going to be doing in practice what is actually a theoretical idea. We've talked about how we take a single sample from a population, and that's the only sample we have and know about. But in theory, our sample is just one of many that we could have pulled from the population. And so in this lab exercise, we're going to be simulating that, simulating taking many possible samples and seeing how they compare to each other and seeing how we can summarize the information we get about these samples. So we're going to be going to a website that's called SAMP. Just click on that link in step 2. And this talks a little bit about the background for the simulation exercise. It is looking at a town that has 11,042 adults, and you're getting the opinions of people who live in this town because there's a proposal to redevelop the town center. So how do people feel about that? And they're being asked on a scale from 1 to 5 how much they support redeveloping the town center. Now, for our purposes, we're only going to be looking at simple random sampling. We're not going to worry about any of the other items over here on the right-hand side. So we're just going to click Simple Random Sampling. And this describes what simple random sampling is. With this method, every voter in the town is given an index number. These index numbers are picked at random until the sample size is reached. A number can only be picked once. This means sampling is without replacement. Once someone's selected, they are not going to be put back into the pool again to be sampled again. And the citizens who have the selected index numbers are surveyed. What we're going to do in this simulation exercise is first look at 1% samples of our population, and then we're going to look at 10% samples of our population. So the first thing, to get a 1% sample, you just type a number 1 in the box and then hit continue. And you see a whole bunch of results. It tells you your sample is 110, the population is 11,041 people, the percent sampled is a 1% sample, we get a mean, a median, and some other pieces of information. And at the bottom, there's that scale about opinions on the town center. We see our sample mean is 3.1, and so you see that the average opinion is neutral about the town center. So what am I asking you to do with this information? If we go back over to the lab instructions, I want you to do that 10 times. Take 10 1% samples and get the mean for each of them. So we've gotten our first sample, and then we're going to enter this information into our studio. What we're doing is, based on all of these 1% samples, we're going to create a variable called sampmean1. So in the console, not in your notebook, you can copy and paste this. And instead of the word mean1, we're going to replace that with what we got as our mean. And when you do this, you're going to probably get a different number than what I did, because there are a whole bunch of possible samples you could pull. But for me, my first sample mean is 3.1. So I'm going to do, where I have the word mean1, change that to 3.1. And I'm going to do this 10 times. Originally, I was going to have you guys do it 20 times. So even though it seems tedious, it could have been twice as tedious doing it 20 times instead of 10. So I'm going to do that 9 more times. So for example, I'll hit continue, and now I'm going to say let's get another 1% sample, and my mean is 3.1. It won't always be 3.1. I'll try it a third time. Okay, this time the mean is 3.364. And so we're going to keep doing this until we get 10 of them total. I'm going to pause while I'm doing this so that we don't run out of time in this video. I'll come back when I've entered all 10. Okay, now I'm back, and I've done it 10 times, and I have each of the 10 means entered here. Be very careful. You have commas separating each. Be careful you're using a decimal point. There's no typos. And so this, and I'm going to now hit enter. And you can see over here, now I have a variable called sampmean1 that contains all of the sample means for 1% samples. Go back to the instructions. Now we're going to do it for a 10% sample. So we're going to again do it 10 times, get 10 means, but we're going to make a variable called samp mean 10. Let me get that set up over here. Samp mean 10, whoops, the assignment operator. C, and then we'll put our means in here. So samp mean 1 was the 1% samples. Samp mean 10 is the 10% samples. And let me go back. And so now instead of typing 1 here, I'm going to type 10. And I have a mean of 3.051. So 3.051, comma. And I'm going to add 10 means for sample of 10%. So I'm going to pause again, get that information here, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now I've gotten my 10% samples. Those samples have 1,104 people in them compared to the 1% samples that have 110 people. And I got the means for taking a 10% sample 10 times. And I'm going to enter that information. So next, I ask you to get the mean and standard deviations for both of these variables. So let me go back and do mean, samp mean 1. And then let me do mean, samp mean 10. Then let me do standard deviation of samp mean 1 and the standard deviation of samp mean 10. Okay, so compare the means. The mean for the 1% samples, the mean of means of 1% samples is 3.2436. So we took 10 samples, got the mean for each of those samples, and then got the mean of all of those means. We did the same thing with the 10% samples. And then we have the standard deviations here for each of those means of means. How spread out are all of those means from the overall mean? Now, each of you is going to give me this information when you fill out your lab info, and I'm going to take the whole class's information and put it together and make a table and a histogram. So we'll see for everyone in the class, your mean of means will get averaged with your other classmates' means of means, and we'll see how this pans out into a histogram. So where do you do this? Well, you go back up to the week by week. You go over to week 8. You go over to the lab assignment. And I ask you for the mean and standard deviation for the 1% samples. So I'm just going to go over. And for the 1% samples, it was 3.2436. And standard deviation was equal to 0.1474, let's say. I'll round it. 0.1474. Then I ask you to explain what these numbers represent. So give me a sentence for that. And then do the same for the 10% samples. That's all you have to submit for the lab. You don't have to knit anything or do anything else. Just do the exercise as it was described, getting the samples, getting the means, getting the mean and standard deviation of all of the means together for the 2 different sample sizes, and then put this information in here. That's all.